Hi, and welcome to Together, the podcast where we love to dive into the juicy terrain of conscious partnership and parenting. And our mission is to become one of the leading podcasts, like the number one podcast when it comes to this topic of sacred relationship. There's lots of podcasts out there which I love and I value and I learn from that touches the aspect of relationship itself. And the part that Courtney and I are so passionate about is also the relational alchemy, how much we can actually transmute and transform the generational imprinting that we all carry in our DNA from when we entered the planet, that we carry from our ancestors, from the specific constellation that we grew up in. It's intimately getting to know that so that we can, from an empowered place, rewrite the wounded story into the hero's journey. Before I dive into today, the people who are watching the video are the only ones that are going to see this, but I have rose spray. And I wanted to share this because this is part of my process before any podcast. As I resource and regulate my nervous system by taking in the senses of, like, the sense of smell. I love using the medicine of rose water. And I wanted to share that because so much of showing up for a sacred relationship means having many tools and elements of resourcing, regulating our nervous system, building what's called tone in our ventral vagal. And the more that we do this, the more we can offer over our greatest qualities to the relationship to really thrive. In the conditioned old way, I really believe that there's this expectation that others will meet our needs, which partly is the way that it happens. And the way that it happens in the best way is when we do our personal work and we offer over the best qualities that will organically draw out or initiate the elements that we're needing that help us feel loved and seen and cared for. And so, rose spray. I'll send you energetically some sprays. Okay, so before we dive into today's episode, I just want to name, obviously, if you're watching this, you see that it's just me. If you're listening, you haven't heard Courtney yet. It's because we're doing a new thing. We're shaking things up, and we're going to do some solo casts from now on. Sorry, not entirely. It'll be mostly Courtney and I, and then when we bring on guests, and then every once in a while, we're going to do, Courtney will do, she did her first one last week. This is my first one where we just do a solo cast where it's just going to be me from the masculine seat, from me being a man in a man's body, sharing what's alive in me, sharing a topic and a theme that I've really seen as important when I'm looking at the collective presence of men, the struggles, the challenges, and the wins and the celebrations. And I'm excited to do this format because I love the format where Courtney and I go into a topic and we get to relate back and forth and share both of our perspectives and share our learnings. And really what you're relating with when it's both of us is we're sharing our we space. So it's this we talk about often in our teachings with our clients and our community and our couples retreats. It's like it's you, me, and the we. We share a nervous system. We have a collective nervous system. Now, what's unique in this format is I'm just sharing from my seat. We're not really in the proximity of that shared nervous system with Courtney not being here. And so it's going to be different material, different context, different pace, might touch you different. And this is why we felt inspired to do it. Because if Courtney's on her own, and when I was editing, I do the edits for our podcast, and when I was looking at last week's episode, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a different quality that comes from her when it's just her. And I love getting to feel her inner authority and her mastery when I'm not there changing the field. Both are beautiful, and I'm so glad that you, listeners, if you've listened to the last one, if not, I'd go highly recommend. It's on conception and preconception. There's such a unique quality. There's so much value there. And so today I want to talk about the journey of man. And I want to talk about some of the themes that I notice when I'm working with men. My ideal client is men who are in leadership roles, and they want to deepen in the relational space with their partner, their kids, their team members, so that they can feel more fulfilled, more connected, a deeper sense of belonging, confidence, joy, fun, pleasure. What I've seen for a lot of men is this journey of being a leader, but grinding, sacrificing sleep, this whole construct or this mantra of, I think the first person I heard it from, and I love Tony Robbins, but I heard it from him first. It was like, you can sleep when you're dead. And then now when I see him in his latter phase of his life, what I hear him having insights around is that maybe that wasn't the most effective way of grinding once realizing the impact on the family unit. And I really want to take his wisdom for where he's at in that phase and integrate it now at this phase that I'm at, which is at a younger phase. And so I wanted to just have this conversation. This can be for men, for women, and just share some of I want to share some of the themes that I've noticed with my clients and what I've learned and seen as the most helpful to evolve into higher states of maturity as a man. Before we go into the juice of and the meat of that, I just want to give a quick shout out. So we have a recent new sponsor, Mindful Meds. We love their product. They have a whole strain of medicinal mushrooms. There's some that are psychoactive and some that aren't. My favorite is Happy Days. Beautiful ingredients in it: ashwagandha, lion's mane, cordyceps, holy basil, black pepper, and it just really helps soothe the nervous system. Like, helps create some regulation. Creates, how I notice it in myself is it creates some space in my nervous system. It's like an allyship. That mycelium network of the fungi work inside of this physical vessel and help me respond instead of react within myself and within my relationships. And so if you feel inspired and you want to try out some of their product because you're a valued listener, you get 15% off. All you have to do is go to mindfulmeds.io, put in the promo code together, and you'll get 15% off. Okay, so this topic, the journey of man. In order to go into this journey of man, I feel like an important piece to name is collectively there are a lot of men that are struggling. There's a lot of men that are thriving too, but I just want to call out the piece that there's a lot of men that are struggling. They want something more. They know there's something more, but they're so stuck in the helplessness of not knowing what to do, not knowing what to change. They're trying all the things. They're reading the books. They're busting their ass in work, and it's just, they don't feel good. Their partners are sharing things like they don't feel emotionally met. They're feeling inundated by life, which creates this symptom that I've seen so often where men isolate. When there's that level of feeling like life is too much, struggle, challenge, the tendency in the conditioned way that we're working out of, that I'm inviting us all out of, is to just isolate and hide. This is called the shadow. When we hide these aspects of ourselves that feel vulnerable, that feel tender. What I've found in my own lived experience and with the clients that end up landing in my lap that I end up supporting is that way can only last for so long. Hiding the more vulnerable parts that maybe haven't been integrated or processed from a really challenging or traumatizing childhood where there's criticism, shame, neglect, abuse. And this is true for both men and women. I support both men and women. I just want to really speak to the journey of man in this episode. And if you're a woman listening, you can just take where this has relevance to you. That will be, I'm sure in some places feel the same and then some places different. So what I've seen and lived is if this pattern of isolation and hiding happens, we actually give away our power. We lose the access of the gold at the center, at the seed of the shadow, the part that feels unlovable, where the mind, the ego can convince us that it is unlovable. And so we're just going to pretend that it's not there, the things that have happened in childhood, and we're just going to keep moving forward. We're just going to work on the mission. We're going to do the thing and hope that those experiences, those feelings that we just don't want to deal with, never come back. This is such a strong pattern for so many men that they just don't even remember what it would be like to feel, or they just never have had access to feeling more vulnerable emotions, because for so many men at really early stages of development, their feelings were a problem. They were shamed. They were put down. They were told it was weak to suck it up. And that creates so much hurt in the collective. So much hurt in the collective. The reason for this is if those feelings and experiences are shut down early on as little boys, it creates this message of, I'm a monster, something's wrong with me. I'm weak. And then when we fast forward into adulthood, if that's in there, it creates this internalized shame of what's in there. It's in there. We can't get rid of it, but we can suppress it or repress it, shut it down, freeze it, which is what most men do. Numb it out. This is why there's such high counts of porn addiction, just addictions in general, alcohol, drugs. This is why there's so much conflict in a relationship, where the common theme is men can't hold space for women's upset feelings, can't hold them in reverence or care. They get defensive and reactive. It's because of the internalized shame. And so if we don't get to know this part of ourselves as men, the shadow, the vulnerable, scared part of ourselves, the part that does feel shame, that does feel like a monster, if we don't bring that out and place it on the table and talk about it and look at it and find ways that it's going to feel manageable to look at it, those parts won't, if we don't do that, those parts won't receive the love that they've always needed. And then it just creates the symptoms of struggle in business, struggle with finance, struggle in the partnership, feeling like the kids are out of control and being really reactive. And if you're a leader listening to this, the motivation to want to do some of this deeper work is it actually does translate into higher profits. It translates into more fulfillment in the mission that you're building. It actually becomes clear in what value you're offering to your clients and your team members. It actually initiates you into the experience of really feeling in your body what it means to be a leader in life. Because in order to lead a team, a business, a family, we have to lead everything that lives inside of us. And if we want to fragment off or not look at or avoid any parts of ourselves, we can't lead others well. We can't attune well. And it creates a mess. And then what do? We override and we just work harder and we hire more coaches and we read more books and then it's just like leads to burnout, exhaustion, more reactivity, unsatisfied partner. It's infuriating. It's this vicious victim cycle that if you're in it, if any part of this resonates, I want to help you get out of it. So my version of this, in order to like make this feel more clear, I'll just share my version. Actually, before I do that, I want to talk about one more piece. The reason it's so important to address these inner shadows, to do this inner work, to deal with and look at the imprinting that we all carry inside of us and how it's informing and impacting our present day moment, our present situation in our business, our relationships. Is if we don't resolve our inner families, this inner house that we live in, we won't have all the access to our greatest gifts to do the thing that we want to do. So if you're a man listening to this, I know that there's a mission you want to discover if you haven't already. Who I end up attracting to work with are usually men who already know what their mission is. They're doing it. It's feeling clunky. They're struggling. But if you're a man who's listening who hasn't found it yet, I know that you feel this desire to find your purpose, to live your purpose, to be executing your purpose, or else you wouldn't be listening to this right now. And the way to get there that I have found is many ingredients, which we'll go into. But one that I really want to highlight here is creating resolution to the inner family and the home that lives inside of us, inside of our psyche, inside of our body. There's not a man that I've met who I've sat with in men's circle who hasn't had deep pain in relationship to either not getting the love that was wanted and needed so badly from a parent or both parents or a brother or sister from the nuclear family. The pain that still lives inside that can be touched on, that's unresolved. The more we resolve it, the more we bring that into the light and we bring in other people and ingredients to love those places so that they can be expressed, that energy liberates out of our body. And then guess what comes next? We mature. If we don't do this inner reconciliation from these family members that we still are connected to inside from our childhood, so many of us can think of like, well, my childhood's over. I'm just going to go this way and da-da-da-da. You move on. It's like, well, yeah, but your nervous system, your attachment system logged all of the places you didn't get the ingredients you really needed, where you weren't emotionally met, where you weren't nurtured, where you weren't shown how to be a man, to move and process your anger, how to take responsibility for the power that you carry in your body. If those things didn't happen, they still need to happen. in order for you to have it. There's this term that's used so often about embodiment. Our embodiment comes through lived, felt experience in relationship to life and other people. If there's experiences that we haven't had in our psyche, in our minds, we can think, oh, I'm just going to do the thing. I'm going to do the thing, and then I'll be set free, and then I will feel worthy and lovable and all the things. It's a false script to function by. The more we actually turn inwards and do this relational work, the more we liberate our natural and organic and God-given gifts. Then it's so much easier to access the ideas. It's easier to attract the right people and relationships and opportunities that just move the mission forward. Okay. So healing this inner construct, this inner family system. What this, in a more clear, simple way to understand, is ultimately every one of us is being invited to be initiated by the relationships that we've had in our life and currently have in our life. This includes, and this is the foundation of it, is our mother and our father. This is literally the physical material that we were formed through. The semen from dad, the eggs from mom, that relational exchange of intimacy created the portal for your soul to be birthed into a body and out through mom and into this world. That shapes your entire experience as a human, regardless of what your belief is. Like, think about that. You are half the genetic material of your mom and your dad's side. And then you are going to be molded and informed by what mom was feeling while you were in the womb. You're going to be molded by dad's intent when he and your mother came together, that experience of conception, the conversations around having a child, whether it was an accident or whether it was a conscious choice, all of those ingredients have formed an imprint on what you believe about yourself. Once we then come into the world, we have a whole bunch more experiences that shape our belief and our expectations and our understanding of our experience in our relationship to the masculine and the feminine. And this isn't gender specific. When I say that, it's like we all have a masculine and feminine aspect of ourselves. And often it shows up like more of the feminine qualities show up in the female embodiment, and the masculine qualities can really show up in more of the masculine embodiment. Like little boys, and this has just been proven developmentally, little boys will study their dads and see how they get mom's love. And then they will learn those qualities to get mom's love, to get women's love. They'll study that and how to show up for a mission and execute things. And they study dad. They look up to dad. They want to be dad. And mom, they want mom's love and they want to be merged and attached and just like, they don't ever want to let her go. Any of you who've had toddlers, you know this. Trying to wean from breastfeeding, all the things, it's like they're just the tendencies to want to stay attached, to not leave that enmeshed place. They want to be nurtured and cared for and feel all their feelings. And if the ingredients that mom and dad offered weren't ideal, if mom was overwhelmed, let's say dad and mom are fighting, they didn't want to have you, maybe you were a surprise, and all that energy based an imprint on how you feel inside of your experience, your body. So many ingredients. Play out your childhood. Just imagine all the things where it's like, I really wanted dad to like throw the ball with me more. He never did that. Or I really wanted mom to not put so much of a emotional weight on me to take care of. Like there wasn't enough space for me to feel my feelings or, whatever the scenario. There's going to be scenarios that were painful and there's going to be scenarios that felt so good that you never wanted to end. The shadow and the light. I just wanted to give some context for this to make sense. To repair this inner family system that lives in our psyche and our bodies, we have to understand that we've been impacted by our relationship to our family we grew up with. In order to repair it truly, there needs to be an inquiry, a contemplation, a processing of emotions where energy's been logged in the body, where energy's been logged in our thoughts, our belief systems. We have to go in and get to know how they're showing up in the present moment. And we have to rewrite it so that it's balanced. There needs to be a balance between the masculine and the feminine. How this can show up if it's imbalanced is placing one or both parents on a pedestal and thinking that saying things like they're my best friend. Oh God, they never did anything wrong as parents. They were just amazing, but maybe you lack memories about it. I'm like, oh yeah, tell me more. Like, well, I don't really remember, but they were just so great. This is an example of an imbalance inside where the psyche starts to fragment things and numb things out and forget, not look at the full picture. Because the reality is mom and dad are both light and dark. They have shadow. We all have light and shadow. Our personal work is to really intimately process what we've remembered inside of us in relationship to mom and dad and balance it so that we can see both. So that when we look at mom, when we relate with mom or dad, we can hold them with like love and compassion and also hold them in accountability where they're places where they did create hurt, where they may be neglected, where they didn't protect, and with dad where he was shaming or abusive, or it's holding both. It's like, yes, they can be, whoa, they loved me so much. They were encouraging. They were supportive. They always told me I could do whatever I put my mind to, like whatever your version is. It's holding all of it so that inside there's just a greater sense of reality. There's a realistic templating inside of, yeah, there's places where I have so many gifts from what I experienced, and there's places that, I've really had to process and move through. If we do that, if we did that, like if you had that experience growing up where your parents were emotionally aware and you were able to process all that as you developed, then great. You're probably a very securely attached human being. You probably have lots of resilience. It's probably easy for you to create success. You probably feel a deep sense of self-love. You feel connected, a deep sense of belonging. You know that you're enough and you contribute that to all the relationships in your life. And if you're in that place, oh God, yes. Celebrating and respecting and honoring your parents for having the wisdom to bring in outside layers for them to feel supported, to be able to meet you in the ways that you really needed. For those of you that didn't have that, things probably feel a little bit more hard and difficult, which is where these inner reparations need to happen. The way that we get to do that is in our present day relationships. This is why I do the work that I do. I'm an intuitive coach and a relationship expert. I have focused so intently and devoted my entire life to do my personal work and do these inner reparations with my inner family system that has been impacted by the external family system, and recreate the environment and the ingredients that I need to be in my power, to feel loved, seen, heard, understood, for me to process all of my emotions. And I've had to create an external soul, I call it soul family, a support system, people who have the right ingredients and qualities that are unique to me, where I can move through the material, what I call sacred material that lives inside of me from all of these experiences from when I was a kid, or that come from my mom and dad's lived experiences that stuck to me because I'm part of them. The more I can bring these parts of myself, these vulnerable parts of myself, the shadow part of me, to these people, to my men's circles, and be loved in those places, it initiates me into my power. It helps me mature from those younger parts that are still looking for the love from mom and still looking for the acknowledgement from dad and the guidance of how to be a man and to be respected and to have apologies where there was hurt and harm. And if I receive now as a man all of these ingredients, knowing that they're needed, I can resolve and repair those tender, hurt, wounded places inside of me. So a way of looking at this is if I have a part that's a baby, or if I have a part that's 3 years old that just got hurt really bad, and my body, my mind, my psyche remembered that experience, and is like, I will never be in that vulnerable state again, and has created this whole pattern of like maybe not trusting other people in a relationship or attracting shitty situations. If I get that part loved and met, it will grow up. So let's just imagine you've got a 2-year-old in there that was abused. If the repair doesn't happen, that experience will log in there, and it's probably too overwhelming. If there isn't a relational repair, your body will freeze that part out, because it's actually not safe to just be walking around with that wound. If it can't be met, it creates an even deeper vulnerability where you could get hurt more and attacked and shamed. And so that part will freeze, and it freezes until it can feel safety and capacity in someone else's nervous system. And then that part will start to come to the surface to be processed. That's the work that I do, is creating safe space for your nervous system to start orienting and be like, oh, I can be here. And then all of a sudden memories come back, emotions start to move. And then those younger parts start to grow up, and you may not even realize or know that they're driving the ship. The way that you would know if they're driving the ship is if you're getting external feedback from life that says, you're hurting, you're just, you're creating lots of disappointment, you're just like struggling in your decisions around your business, it's so hard to make money, you feel lost, confused, overwhelmed, dark thoughts, scared a lot of the time. That's usually a symptom of these parts that are young in there that are looking to be loved and attuned with. Okay, so if we bring these parts to the right ingredients in relationship, they get to grow up. When those parts get to grow up, guess what? We have now, on a biological sense, we have more access to the prefrontal cortex of our brain. This is our executive function. This is where we make really sound decisions. It's where we can take in the wise perspective, the larger perspective of life, of what's needed. This is where we go into problem solving, where really challenging things happen. This is where we can just feel the weight of our body when our partner's really upset with us, and we can not take it personal, and we're able to respond instead of react and be like, yeah, you can, of course you can feel that. I can hold that. I love you. I'm here. When we resolve these pieces, we can actually lead ourselves into the situations that are helpful. The more we can do that, the more we can have the confidence and the ground and the resilience to meet other people. This is what leads to all of the things that I was talking about that so many of you men want: more success, more satisfaction from your partner sharing things that they appreciate instead of just all the things that piss them off, or where you're hurting them or not doing enough. And so there's the context. There are all those pieces. I hope you're still with me. I want to use now, took me a long time to get here, but now I want to go, and now that I've oriented around the imprinting, because a lot of people don't even understand how much our childhood, when I talk to a lot of men, especially when I have new clients, that it's like huge leaders in the world, so much success, so many business skills, but then the relational piece, or just how they feel about themselves, where it's like there's so much self-loathing and hate and struggle and addiction, all the things. Once we actually start to orient of, whoa, actually, so much of your childhood has shaped what you're experiencing now. Let's get to know that part of you. Let's start to integrate more of that tender side, the feminine side, and integrate it. Because when that feminine side integrates into the masculine, that's like the most potent creation in the world, in the planet, that I've seen, experience in myself. It's before my story and version of it, one last piece to bring it all together is when we do all of these reparations of this inner construct, the inner family system, we're actually moving into right healthy order, which is, how I talked about earlier, like little boys that if they didn't get met, they become reactive and, shut down, and this internalized shame. The man or the boy that's not held in the way that's needed leads to an emotionally unavailable man. An emotionally unavailable man is a dangerous man. It's a reactive man. It's a manipulative man, a grandiose man. This is where qualities of narcissism come from, grandiosity. And it's just their coping mechanisms to try and get needs met because they actually can't feel their feelings. And so they try to create an environment that's external that they can control to try to feel safe and okay. The ultimate freedom inside is when we can actually welcome all of us to be here, feel our feelings, especially as men. The healing movement for men is to open their hearts, to feel all those places that weren't safe to feel at one point. Again, part of why I do the work that I do, create a field of safety so that the heart can open, which leads into so much more fulfillment and success. So, the healthy right order of these reparations and the intention of this is, once we as men become more emotionally intelligent and aware and capable to welcome the wave and the bounty of feeling and life energy from an empowered feminine, the more we can hold that and welcome it and be initiated by that, the more the feminine offers us over the healthy blueprint for humanity. So how it'll start showing up and expressing, like Courtney, this is so evident, is she births the healthy blueprint of what Cedar needs and our family system needs to feel the most coherent, connected, safe, and alive, where we all get to feel our most authentic selves. I have my own wisdom and version that moves through me where it's like, this is what I want to provide. I want to bring in layers of support. We have what's called a shizka. It's like someone who comes in and, almost whatever our family needs are, whether it's cooking or cleaning, tending Cedar, they'll come in for a portion of the week to help us. We have someone that stacks our wood. We have team members in our business. We have layers of support. And that's the thing that wants to birth through me is like, let's bring in a team. Let's bring in the village to support this thing so that we can Courtney and I can be really connected and bonded. And then that resource can flow into what Cedar's needing. And so if I bring in the ingredients that I want to provide, what that'll do is open and unfold Courtney as the feminine as an example, in this example, to provide the new healthy blueprint that's emerging as we evolve in consciousness, as we move through humanity. I've watched this. It's like she's able to see like, oh, this situation or this dynamic is creating dysregulation for Cedar, or, oh, I'm not feeling as connected to you. Like something needs to shift. She's bringing the blueprint. She's birthing the blueprint that I get to respond to as the masculine. The safer she feels, the more I do my work, the more I can emotionally hold space for the waves that move through her, the more she can share the blueprint, and then I can try it on. It doesn't mean it's always going to be the thing that I choose to do, but what this sacred dance is being initiated by each other. So if I do my emotional work and I build more capacity, I can meet her and she feels met, she's going to open and she's going to feel sometimes disappointed, hurt with something that doesn't really match the old blueprint. She might then be sharing pleasure and beauty and desires. And it's this invitation for me to want to be curious to meet them. How can we meet them? How can I see the wisdom in what's wanting to be birthed here? The more that dance is happening, the more we are moving into the new reality where there's less conflict, there's less scarcity consciousness, there's less you versus me. It's more of this healthy structure that we all as humanity need to return to. And it's this healthy family system. It's an emotionally mature man that can meet the needs of the family and the village because of his emotional capacity, of the tone and the resilience he's built in himself, can meet the feminine energy in himself and externally. And then the more the feminine can feel that, the more the feminine can open and surrender. Like think of birth. Like if you've ever watched a woman naturally birth a child, they embody what I'm talking about. They have to surrender to life itself. They have to surrender to the pain, the contractions, this human that's doing it, this child inside that's moving in certain ways and making its way out through her actual vessel, through her yoni, like this pain and something, she has to soften and surrender. She has to trust the layers of support outside of her. So an example in Courtney's birth, I knew that my only role was to ensure everyone in the field around her birth, where their job was to reassure the assurance of mama in herself. So to reassure her in her own assurance in herself, the wisdom of her experience as the mom birthing life, trusting that there's a wisdom there that we don't all know. This is what I'm talking about. I noticed the more that happened in Courtney, and it's funny that it's led to this piece. This wasn't intended, but Courtney's last episode was around conception, but this is kind of correlated, is in order to birth life in a good way, there needs to be many layers of support and safety so that the feminine energy that lives in all of us, that's life itself, can emerge into, can unfold into. It makes life so much more enjoyable when we respond to that, when we allow it ourselves to be initiated by that process. And so this is the MO of wanting to do men's work. This is the MO of wanting to understand the masculine journey, understanding that in order to resolve all of your pains and struggles when it comes to your business, your relationship to your partner, your kids, the shame that you feel, the parts that you want to hide, all of those external ingredients, all of those inner turmoils and struggles is this invitation to be initiated by your relationship to life itself and the people that life has brought to you. Your mom and your dad are divinely chosen for the right amount of tension for you to go back and look at the pieces that are forgotten, that have been left behind, so that you can love them and bring the qualities and the people in necessary to love them so that they can mature and grow up, so that you can actually in your life here express in the way that you're meant to. So many men just wait and struggle and use the vices and try this way of, there's so many versions. There's the man who's just lost in addiction and isolation and just wants to hide away in the mountains. And then there's the masculine who's just like, looks like he's rocking it. He's so successful, millions of dollars, but is alone and isolated and scared. And not that both of those ingredients are always that, There's lots of men that I know that are millionaires and super happy and connected with their family. That's the ideal. But I'm just calling out the parts where it's like where there's a disconnect from the unresolved material and work inside. I know there's a lot of concepts I'm weaving together. I hope you're still with me. So, this healthy right order, masculine, and it's not one better than the other. And I want to bring this in too, because I want to challenge the collective story around this. And my buddy Mark Groves and I talk about this, where there can be this narrative of like, once the men heal, then everything will be better. That in itself is an imbalance between the masculine and the feminine, because an embodied, mature feminine would not put blame on the masculine for the inner pain and struggle and turmoil that's living inside. That's not a mature way of looking at it. And there's no judgment on that narrative. It's a part of the stage of evolution, but that's not a balanced construct. There's a part that's feeling disconnected from how the masculine inside is meeting the feminine inside. Once we resolve these pieces relationally, then it does translate into the external environment where it will attract masculine that can hold space, that can meet you in all the ways, and vice versa. There can be the narrative of like, oh, the feminine, if only they didn't feel so much, and like, oh, they're always like mad at me, and and then wanting to isolate. And that's not it either. That's the imbalanced narrative. It's this victim consciousness that sees the feminine as the problem. Neither one of us is the problem. We are the solution. Once we recognize we are energies and embodiments to initiate each other into a more wise truth. It's reconciliation. It's deepening in consciousness. It's understanding that we're complex. We are shaped and formed by our environment, astrologically and from our nuclear family. God, I have a client that grew up in those early developmental phases around the Holocaust. And I'll tell you what, that's shaped this human. And we're unwinding it by going back and getting to know it and holding space for the emotions that need to be processed about the intensity of that time that's so overwhelming for a little one. So many layers of support are needed for something like that to integrate. We all have these parts of ourselves. You all have your own version in your stories. Okay. So passionate about this. The reconciliation of the inner family system. Explained in depth. So how this looked in my story and version. In my story and version of this journey, I'm going to condense it. I did not feel emotionally met as a boy. I felt overwhelmed. And I can see when I look back after all these layers of work that I've done that I had to shut down parts of myself. Separated from my mother at birth, my biological mother, raised by my grandma until I was 14 months. She got diagnosed with terminal cancer. Most of you know this story if you've been listening to the podcast. And then in my new family, so the third place of attachment, of secure attachment, primary attachment, at 14 months. All very different qualities from the people externally. What that created for me, and, going from just being raised by my grandmother, a woman who was older, spent a lot of time alone. Like I can feel in my body, it was like just her and I, sometimes my cousin, in her little apartment in New Westminster, British Columbia. I developed a state of resilience from that environment. And then all of a sudden, one day at 14 months, I'm in a new family system. And I now all of a sudden have two grown-up sisters. One's 10 years older, one's 5 years older. I now have a mom and a dad. My dad is a lot of force and potency. My mom also. And then my grandma, who was raising me, who was becoming my primary attachment, all of a sudden was just gone. And I've had to process this day. It's been a painful one for me to understand of how it's shaped my adult life, how it prevented me from leading in the world and creating success in business. Like I was doing all the steps and I was trying to do, the reason I want to tie this together is I was trying to develop success financially and with products I was putting out in the world, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't transition into that level of man that I wanted to be with this unresolved piece. And a lot of it comes back to this day, a lot of these days, but this is an important one, is that transition for me of losing my grandma and entering in this whole new constellation of humans where there was so much happening and so much movement. And then I lost my safe place. My grandma was gone. And the availability for me to be attuned with of how intense that would have been as a 14-month-year-old, like a 14-month child, like, oh my goodness, so tender, so vulnerable, so vulnerable. Everyone is happy and excited, which looks from the outside in everyone else's lens looks great. But for a 14-month-old, and I'm telling you through lived, felt experience, that was overwhelming. That transition was too quick. My grandma just like snuck out the back door because she didn't want to be, she just wanted to kind of disappear with so much love. But that was frightening because all of a sudden she was gone. I'm in this new family and they're all excited and all this life energy. And I'm like, I don't know what just happened. And my grandma's not coming back in the time that I need her. And now I'm less important. Before with my grandma, it's like she could just meet my needs. There's no other competing siblings. And all of a sudden I now have 2 siblings. And so there's going to be a natural balance of needs in that field. And lots of my needs were met. And what I really would have needed that I've had to process around through this, to give you an example of what this kind of work looks like, is I had to process the level of shock and overwhelm there was in my body that no one was like mirroring back to me. Oh, like little one, like sharing with me and talking. We didn't have this level of awareness around development at this phase. So it's only now being discovered, which is why we're having this conversation. Is what would have really been helpful is for someone to hold me and just hold space, create space from all the excitement and the kids. And then like for mom, as an example, to just hold me and just know that that experience would have been overwhelming. And there would have been lots of like need for nurture and gentleness and describing like, we're your new family and you can still love your grandma. And we're going to make sure that we keep her alive for you in talking about her. And and then I imagine this is so scary and sharing things like this so my body could process the shock and at least know what's actually happening. And then lots of that would have probably and realistically taken months to shake out the grief, the anger, the frustration, all the things that as a baby my body would have wanted to express, which maybe it did in some ways. And there's places where that just didn't happen. So I had to freeze and I shut down and I fast forward in life, and it just created a bunch of relational issues. I isolated a lot. I felt lots of shame. I felt like something was wrong with me. For most of my upbringing, I thought that I didn't fit. I didn't belong. Something didn't feel right. I felt confused. There was some part of me searching for something. I wanted to know my mom and my dad, but I didn't really know that because no one even really talked to me very much about about being adopted. They didn't ask me questions about it. They didn't, and this, again, there's no shame on this. I'm just describing like these things impact. They loved me beautifully. They gave me a beautiful home to live in and great. And I had an abundant life in lots of ways. Got to go to private school. There was always food on the table. I had the abundance of siblings and that loved me and played with me. And like I had a beautiful upbringing in so many ways. And there's ingredients that were super overwhelming that I had to isolate, I had to shut down the tender, vulnerable part of me I didn't feel was welcome. I would have these absolute rage outbursts. When I look back, I'm like, yeah, my nervous system was trying to process the amount of distress of such a quick transition. And then what this looked like is me isolating and repressing certain parts of myself. And then that leading to relationships where when things started to go vulnerable, I'd either end the relationship or I would, I would end the relationship. Or, or I would, like, I ended up ending all the, like, almost all the relationships. One later that I'll share ended in a different way, but I would react in the early phases. I would end the relationship before I could get to the place of reacting, because I noticed the more that these beautiful women that I would meet, like, I would attract incredible women. Like, when I think back to the women that I dated in my younger years, I am so blessed by how much they loved and cared for me. And I didn't understand that I had a limited availability or capacity or development to stay in the connection. I was so afraid of the vulnerable parts coming alive in me that I would end it before I would hurt them or be hurt. Which, just the name, that pattern itself is the reason why I gave a little bit more airtime to that transition when I entered into the family I grew up with, is not integrating that transition, then translated into me not being able to stay in connection with a partner. I would bolt, I would run, I would dislocate because I was dislocated from too quickly. So I didn't know how to navigate those places. It was just once the feelings, it's unconscious when this happens. So I would just end relationships, and then I'd feel shame about it and be like, Mike, what's wrong with you? And I would just, like, beat myself up, and then I would hide and isolate and do drugs. And it was just a mess. It was a fucking mess. Then I decided I'm going to commit. I ended up attracting a partner. We got married, beautiful woman. Still love and respect this human so much. And the dynamic that we lived out, because I hadn't processed and done these inner reparations with myself, my experience, I just unconsciously was codependent. I didn't offer over the qualities that I really wanted to, not in a lack of effort. I tried so hard, and there's lots of ways that I met her, and there's lots of ways that I didn't, which led to a situation where one day she just walked in the door. We didn't even talk about it. There was no lead up. She just decided to leave one day, which, when I look back, like, yeah, totally. I wish we had had the conversation and I could be initiated by her pain and her truth. And this is an important piece. I wish that I could hear and feel her pain. I wish I had the capacity in myself for her to feel safe to share her truth of disappointment and where she maybe doesn't want to be in the relationship, the why and all the things. I wish we could have worked through that together. I wish we could have initiated each other in that. And it may just not have been available developmentally. And so it led to the breakdown of the connection in the relationship. And then I hit this place, rock bottom, where I felt miserable. I didn't have friends. I pushed my friends away. I had really negatively impacted my relationship with my family. And I wanted to kill myself. I was miserable. It felt like being strangled and smothered and beat up and taunted by my shadows. All the parts of me that I didn't even know were driving the ship, all were in my house. Me alone in my house, alone, scared, ashamed, humiliated. Now I'd done the American dream. I had the $100,000, over $100,000 a year. I think at that point I was like $150,000, $175,000 a year. I had a jet boat, a brand new truck, house, beautiful wife. She left. None of that shit that I had mattered. I sold my boat immediately. and and then like fixed up my house and sold it and realized none of that dream that I adopted and bought into was what I actually wanted. I wanted to feel free within myself to be all of who I am, is what I actually wanted. So me chasing the success, me reading all the books was so that I could feel in my power to make sound decisions, safe decisions, that I could offer ingredients and qualities where my partner loved me, that I could nourish my friendships. I wanted to feel connected to life. I wanted to feel the joy of life. And I lacked the ingredients because of my relational misses, because of the lack of knowing and understanding that there is work that needs to happen in connection to another human being to liberate the parts that keep me frozen, whole, held back, or stuck. So if you're a man listening to this, notice what comes up for you in hearing my story, my version. What's your version? What's your story? What are your pain points? Where are the places where you haven't felt safe enough to feel all of your experience, to share about it, to talk about it? Are there places that you aren't looking at, that you're afraid to look at? Do you maybe not have a solid network of men? Do you fear bringing all of yourself to women? Do women feel hurt and disappointed by what you offer them? Do you react? Do you have addictions? No shame, no judgment. You'll probably feel shame. But just let yourself feel it in a way that's helpful, and just know that you're not alone. I've been there. Lots of men have been there. Almost every man I've ever talked to, supported with, sat with in circle has been there. And the thing that liberates us is, as men together, we have these conversations, we share our stories, we get to know that you're not alone. Bring those tender, scary parts of you to the table. Start to get to know. And this is the part of my story where things really changed. This is what got me into the work that I do as an intuitive coach, is how helpful it was to start working with other people who were doing their inner work, doing these, what I call these inner reparations to the family constellation that lives inside of us, whether we're aware of it or not, that I've described in this episode. Once I started to move towards other men and women that were doing that work, they had the ingredients and the energy and the qualities in their nervous system to lend to my nervous system. Mirror neurons and just how our attachment system works is we need to feel what it is that we're wanting to embody from another person in proximity over a period of time consistently for our nervous system to learn the unspoken map, imprinting, the new imprint, the healthy blueprint. We need to feel that from another person for us to have it, for us to adopt it. Because all the patterns that are creating a mess and an issue and are feeling super shitty are from being in consistent proximity to ingredients that don't feel good, that aren't helpful. So we need to correct that and balance out these energies by moving towards people we feel safe with, we feel resonant to. You know, how I notice it in myself now is, and I'm very passionate about this, is if I feel a relationship isn't helpful, if it doesn't feel balanced, I will not indulge. I will not nurture that connection. I will just trust the wisdom of life, and I will move towards a different person, a different environment. This is why I love living in my physical location that I do in the Slocan Valley in British Columbia. I feel nourished by the land every day I walk out into, and the trees and the nature and the birds and and that's helpful. That helps me feel safe in my body. It helps me bring my gifts online, feel excited for life. It's same with people. If we're in relationships that seem heavy and drain us and where we have to abandon parts of ourselves, sometimes it's nuclear family, sometimes it's work colleagues. If we don't start moving towards the ingredients of people that can create enough space and safety for us to process some of these parts that we have driving the ship. Once we do that, these younger parts get to grow up and we get to do the things that we want to do and we get to attract all the cool relationships that we know we really want. And it becomes actually quite easy. It becomes magical. So where my story turned from like the dark night of the soul, ending marriage, wanting to end my life, to hiring a soul coach, very similar work to what I do. Hiring a spiritual mentor, a woman who trained me in my intuitive coaching program, which was really where, when I look back, I'm like, she really taught me to repair my relationship to my feminine inside of me, my inner mother. Like, she really helped me welcome what wanted to emerge as she held space for me. I have so much love and appreciation for her, because that was the most consistently that I was met with the ingredients that I needed to rewrite the wounded victim story that lived inside of me. She had done her work. She was able to hold and love all the places I was so afraid to be seen in. It was like 2 years of me we would do these community circles, and I would bring these parts of myself there, and the community would hold space and everyone would have a turn. And then she would offer guidance and reassurance. Like, she would just, when I look back, like, really what she was doing, she was mothering us all. Which really kind of in my work now, I end up fathering all of my clients. I help repair the relationship to the masculine. Where I've done, and it's not perfect, I have so much more work to do, but where there's more emotional availability than most of the men that people have experienced from their mom, their dad, their partners. And then so when those qualities come in, we get initiated into the health that lives inside. It's not me doing it, it's me just giving you the relational ingredients you need to be in your power to mature. And so these people did that for me. I got to learn this new form of coaching that wasn't so heady. It was intuition, getting to know my gifts. How do I receive information? Do I get visions or images? Can I feel what someone's feeling and reflect it back? I got to learn this over an apprenticeship and over a period of time. And I noticed the more that I did that, the more I worked with my soul coach, and him as the masculine would also hold space for me to feel all these places I'm afraid to be seen in by another man, because inside of me, I unconsciously think men that want to compete with me or put me down or judge me. And then I would bring these parts and like, oh, he's loving me. Oh, I'm able to cry here. Oh, I'm able to be mad here. Oh, I'm able to share, like, this is a desire I have. And it just like kept getting met and appreciated and cared for in those places, kept receiving presence. Every time that I did that, I would go out into life and new things would happen. I'd meet new people. I'd feel more joy. I'd see brighter colors in the trees. I would all of a sudden find myself hugging trees, smelling roses, and just like life was fucking me and it felt good. Or I guess I should say, right, relationship. I was fucking life. And it was blossoming and opening up for me to penetrate it more, for me to experience it more. Like, when I think of making love with my beloved, the more I can penetrate her with my presence, the more alive she becomes, emotive, expressive, vocal. That's what it felt like was happening for life. The more I would get relationally met with the ingredients that were missing, I could go and penetrate life and really feel it and appreciate it and then want to give back to it. And that's the ultimate. This is what I'm talking about, the relational alchemy. This is the transmutation of our imprinting, our material that lives inside of us as men, as humans. When we experience that process, all of the things that we desire and dream of just start to happen in a way more organic way, in a more feminine way. In both, there's like the dance and the balance between the masculine and the feminine, because it takes that masculine devotion to and courage to move towards those tender, unresolved places and get to know. The mission becomes as lead self into the situation that's needed for these parts to come to the table, to mature, to grow up. When we do that, we get to meet life, the feminine, the earth. We get to attune with this new capacity. Once we've moved through our process, we get to attune with like, what does she need? Am I treating her well? Is this helpful? What would she have me do? When we repair all these places in ourselves, we reconcile the dance and the battle between the masculine and the feminine side, and they become coherent and collective and connected. And then it becomes, how can I serve the feminine, which is life, the planet? The more we do this work, the more we reconcile the masculine and the feminine inside of us, our mission becomes, how do I take the gifts that I've been given from God in life and serve the feminine, which is serve life itself? How do I serve humanity? How do I serve my community? How do I serve my clients? How do I serve nature, the children? And it always states in right order is like, how do I serve, as the masculine, whoever your partner, that might be same sex, whatever. How do you serve your partner? What ingredients do you need to be able to serve in that way? To serve that feminine inside of you that has stuff to feel and wants to express and birth and desires. Once we bring all that in together, we're talking about living from a place of overflow, which is how we are meant to live. It's where we thrive. It's where we have serendipitous moments and we see whatever your version is, but I get these angel winks with seeing numbers. Like when I started this on the clock, it was 2:02, and seeing these numbers and thinking of a person, and then they call these clairvoyant aspects of ourselves that we all have access to. The more we get relationally met, my friends, in the way that we've always needed, and we know, we can feel, there's a knowing inside that there's places we need to be met in a certain way that hasn't happened. When you move towards those ingredients and you get met in those places, guess what? Now when you go to work on your business, now when you go to hold space for your partner, now when you go to relate with your kids, you're going to be in awe of what your new reality is. You'll have more space to respond instead of react. You'll have more incredible creative ideas that will attract more money, that will create more value to your clients. You'll know the right ingredients to move through a difficult place in the relationships that you have with other people. You'll know how to take ownership for the places that have impacted another person. You'll know to, when no one's looking, pick up your garbage that you dropped. You'll know to do those right actions that you know in your heart of hearts you're being invited into, even if no one's looking. Again, that's the ultimate freedom. When we make those decisions, when we feel that safe and confident in our body, that's the ultimate. Then, when we go out into business, guess what? And this has been a true statement for me, and it's an important part of the journey to share. When I go back, 6 or 8 years ago, I would listen to Mark Grove's podcasts. I'm trying to remember if it was his podcast back then, if he had that, or if it was just his social media on Facebook. I would take in his content, and I just felt so drawn to him. I felt inspired by his work, his message, the way that he was so focused and devoted to understanding himself in relationship. And fast forward these years, and it's like now we're friends. Just came back from Vegas from last week, and we recorded a podcast together and just got to connect and hang out and talk about life. And it's like that relationship for me is so meaningful. I feel so much love for that man. I feel so much appreciation for that man who's at a different phase of his business journey. He's way farther ahead than I am. And he wants to be close and connected and be an ally and support. And then I get to bring all the gifts that I've cultivated relationally and bring it to him. And we get to have this mutual reciprocal relationship of brotherhood. This is what life gets to be. Last month got to go, and this, I don't mean to share this to brag or anything. This is not what it's about. I'm just trying to share that, last week, going and speaking at an event called The New Human with Zach Bush and Charles Eisenstein, which has always been a dream, to work with people that are of high impact and really living their mission and to share the stage with them. And the part that's meaningful to me in all of it is the relationships feel good. The status of them doesn't matter. It's the relationship feels resonant. There's a shared message, a shared desire for humanity. And it feels so good to be in proximity to that, to be connected to that. And you all get to have that experience. And the way that it happens from my lived experience and from watching it with all of the clients that I support is when we get to know our own inner matrix and we get, when we meet this vulnerable part of ourselves that does need relational ingredients from others, when we move towards that, we then attract more of the relationship that feels good, because life will always give us more of what we focus on and feel. So if we move towards relationships that feel good, where we feel met, we'll attract more of them that mirror back our gifts and our greatest qualities, and that have the capacity to hold the parts of ourselves that we feel afraid of. If we don't do that, guess what? We become the statistic where we're 6 feet under the ground and buried with us is all of our dreams, hopes, and desires. And I don't want that for any of you. So if you're a man listening to this and still listening to this, I hope that you trust your intuition and the gifts that I know you have as a man, and you moved towards the people that you feel drawn to, inspired by, safe with, and start to reveal parts of you that you maybe haven't even discovered yet, you're hiding or holding back. Because the more you do that, all the things that you're looking for when you're scrolling through Instagram and you're trying to find the next business investment, all the things, it's your system saying you need relational ingredients so that you can just magnetize and attract from your embodied feminine, integrated feminine to your masculine. When those come together, you will just magnetize and attract all those things that you're wanting. It won't be so damn hard. Okay, that was a long one. Thank you all for tuning in to the journey of man. Really, you experienced my journey as a man condensed into this place that felt really good to share. And I really hope that something in my orientation around the journey of masculine and the ingredients that lead to struggle and my own lived experience and how that's evolved, I hope that there's something in there that really touches you in the way that you need. I hope there's even one idea that's a little different than it was before, that moves you in the direction of integration, feeling safe in your body, feeling in your power, so that you can do the work that you're meant to do here in the world, so that you can be a safer place, so that you can emotionally welcome the people in your life, specifically and most importantly, your partner and your children, if you have them. Because if we have a connected, coherent, shared nervous system family unit, that is what rewrites this world that we're living in a more helpful, harmonious way, with less conflict, less war. So thank you. Thank you all for listening, tuning in. I'd love to hear your feedback, what came up on this. If you scroll down in the show notes, my email's in there. If you want to shoot me a message, like, what does this bring up? If you want to lightly share, even just like the theme of the story that mine touched in you, anything that you feel inspired to share, anything you would want to hear more of from me, just as Mike is from this masculine role, please shoot me some themes, topics. I'm here to serve what would be the most helpful for you, because it's always helpful for me to be asked those questions. It gives me something to respond to, because my mission is to bring more of my experience that in some way is going to serve you and yours. This is our relational space that we get to share. So I want you to bring yourself to the table so that we can do this work together. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, your presence. And yeah, in closing, just a quick refresher. If you feel inspired to use any of the Mindful Med products, they're our sponsor. I'm so grateful to them. Love their stuff. Promo code together, 15% off. And my trust in knowing is that it'll really help you in your biology to be able to respond a little bit more than reacting. So you can go to mindfulmeds.io, find the product that you feel intuitively drawn to that'll support you to be the person that you are here to be from that place of empowerment. Love and appreciate all of you. Until next time.